Joe Biden. Well, first, I want to play an ad that I think will actually be effective in the Democratic primary. This ad, and there was some kind of disagreement about the general about how this would play. I'm actually not convinced it wouldn't potentially play well in the general, although I think a lot of people just don't care about this sort of stuff. But what I think it does very effectively is it is Trumpian in a smart sense of the word, which is that it's just basically humiliating. This is a familiar attack on Trump, but it's not "how dare you, sir." It's "you're a jackass, dude." Joe Biden still leads in the polls. Now, we can stipulate, and it is true, that basically everything changes after Iowa. And so the real question is are you in contention in Iowa? And I feel increasingly positive about Bernie Sanders going to Iowa. But I'm increasingly negative about Buttigieg, and Biden is still in play. But the thing is that I think just as if people in certain environments overproject their like of Warren onto a broader electorate, which doesn't exist, and I'm talking empirically, she's not particularly popular in Massachusetts. And those of us, have overprojected a dislike on Biden. And we all know, I mean, it's not even worth talking about. Everybody knows why Biden's bad. Okay. There's not valuable airtime here in going over that. He's awful. Any policy area you could look at.
He's like a perfect synthesis of Trump and Hillary.
but I anecdotally and reflected in the polls, there are just endless day in and day out. Again, it's just the classic thing. People who don't obsess with this stuff. Yeah, I think he's a decent guy, and I think he's the right person to take on Trump. And they're also thinking back to 2016, where, look, Bernie definitely would have beat Trump, and that's the alternative scenario in which we start to actually maybe save the earth. But Joe Biden would have beat Donald Trump in a landslide on pure style, basically. And I think this ad in a Democratic primary, I think they've hit a formula for really reinforcing that tendency. And for those of you who, look, this is about Biden foreign policy. Biden has an awful foreign policy on every corner of earth. But set as a style, this is effective.
World leaders caught on camera laughing about President Trump.
Several world leaders mocking President Trump.
They're laughing at him.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
World leaders mocking and ridiculing him for being completely off balance.
Allies are deeply worried about him. They say he's becoming increasingly isolated. Something is very wrong.
The world sees Trump for what he is: insincere, ill-informed, corrupt, dangerously incompetent, and incapable, in my view, of world leadership. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, if ever, being able to recover America's standing in the world and our capacity to bring nations together.
Honestly, for the primary, there's definitely some, that's the second half of it with the violin folks and the PMC crowd and Morning Joe. That's very appealing. In the general, I just dropped the second half of it and used the first half. He's a jackass. That's a very good humiliation tactic.
The other thing I worry about is now that Kerry's endorsed him today. Kerry ran a similar sort of message against George Bush in 2004, and George Bush won. Absolutely.
There's a lot of analogies into some type of degrade world. Kerry Bush is Biden Trump. Now, on the other hand, Joe Biden is too cranky to deal with constituents and protesters. How the hell is he going to deal with Donald Trump?
I like calling this guy a protester too. You'll see him in a second here.
Yeah, protesters.
And he's no backbone. We know that for that. But you, on the other hand, sent your son over there to get a job and work for a gas company that he had no experience with gas or nothing, in order to get access for the president. So
I can see the fire in
you're
his
selling
eyes.
access to the president just like he was.
So
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that. No one has proved that.
I see it on the TV.
You see it on the TV.
All I do is watch.
No, I know you do. And by the way, that's why I'm not sedentary. I get up and no, let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take an IQ test, okay?
Now, I didn't say you were doing anything wrong.
You said I set up my son to work in an oil company. Isn't that what you said? Get your words straight, Jack.
I hear on MSNBC.
You don't hear that in MSNBC?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Excuse me. MSNBC helps me, you old fuck.
Well, I don't want to either.
Well, yeah, you do. But look, here's the deal.
It looks like you don't have any more backbone than Trump does when you're
Oh, snap!
World star.
World star. Two degraded old white men. Two discarded old pieces of mayo. No, I'm just kidding. I actually like that. You know what? Actually, first of all, total props to that guy because that takes a lot of courage to confront somebody who, with that kind of hostility. I will
and also be kind of wrong while you do it.
And be kind of wrong while you do it and then appeal to like one of the
sent.
Yeah. It should not have said sent and don't appeal to MSNBC. I like how it's like biased. Just like, no, we get totally covered for by MSNBC. I've been practically incontinent for 4 months and they're still hyping me.
I like Obama jumping in and being like, instead of his don't boo vote, he's like, don't do push-ups, fight.
Yeah.
Well, this probably will, I hate to say it.
Well, I have an IQ test. We can...
people like this about Joe Biden.
They do.
He's like a tough guy.
No.
He seems cool.
Stand
up to Trump.
That was the other thing that I was going to say that I think, again, I'm sorry, it's just totally missed in these media quarters. I completely can see somebody watching that and being like, guy was insulting his son. Guy was telling him he had no backbone. And yes, it's so dumb. I get it. And I want the Bernie version. I want we need to actually do something about our world here. And Donald Trump's, just have disdain. Yeah, whatever, shut up. We got to talk about healthcare. But the fact that people did not understand the great 2016 smelling salt Olympics did not work. And we're still doing How Dare You, Sir is insane. And frankly, it will be embarrassing and humiliating globally and just horrible for the prospects of the human race to watch that campaign unfold. But electorally, that's you go up against Trump and instead of well, how dare you spread a lie about Ukraine, sir? I will have you know to be like, hey, Jack, I might be losing all my mental faculties, but I'll still take you behind the schoolyard. That's better. That's so much better. So there's a ton of problems about Joe Biden's electability, but I think hopefully he'll just sink in Iowa. But I think people in our circles need to get a lot less projective about it. Because even right there, I look at that and I think he's being a complete asshole and it's embarrassing, but I totally see how people would like that. Just like Jamie said.
He's going to beat Trump up.
Well, and the problem is...
That's a good frame.
That guy that challenged him, even though he didn't have the specific facts right, Biden didn't send his son over, but he just allowed it, right?
Yeah, he allowed it.
But that guy probably watches a lot more news than most people do, frankly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
I also have to say I was right when I initially disagreed with Sam and some other folks about how Bernie needs to be pulling supporters from Warren in order to win. I think Bernie has a lot more supporters that he could pull from Biden. People's politics, people's choices of candidate do not usually progress across the political spectrum in a way that makes ideological sense.
But that was, well, at least the really important part of the argument about Warren and Sanders was inside the circles of people who have influence saying there weren't radical, vast disparities and differences. And that's why that argument needed to be had, because that's completely untrue. And we needed to stop that gaslighting and debunk those myths.
Well,
so that was really, really important. Let's take another.
We've seen it now. Bernie is pulling more support from Biden than from Warren.
But I think we've been the second choice stuff we've been fairly up on, like as far as who goes to where, like Biden's people go to Bernie. Like that's been clear.
No, we've already said that.
That's been clear for
that's been clear from no one debated that. Everybody knew that. But
the Warren stuff,
the Warren stuff was about the circles of the argument of when people were saying there weren't these vital distinctions that needed to be spelled out. That was the point of those conversations. You're calling from a 404 area code. Who